it's not about the money at a certain point. It's more about how far can I go? How can I help others? Because I believe in it that much to bring value to our community in order to grow our community.
Welcome everyone to the Closing Table Podcast, real accounts from real estate professionals brought to you by WindowStill. I'm your host, Kat Schooler, and today I'm sitting down with real estate agent Shae Spitz. Shae is with eXp Realty out in Columbus, Nebraska, and today we sit down and talk about how she took a leap of faith early on in house flipping that then led to her building her real estate business as an agent. We talk about Shae's podcast, the Real Moms podcast, and her mission to support other mompreneurs both locally and nationwide. And then we talk about how Shae is putting her money where her mouth is and digging deep as a developer for a new neighborhood nearby that is building up affordable housing for people in her locality. So without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Shae. Shae, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to start our conversation, and I'd love to kick it off with how you started your journey in real estate and what initially drew you to this career path.
So it's a very interesting, I didn't grow up with family in the real estate industry at all. I mean, it was kind of interesting when I got into real estate, I didn't realize how many times people actually move, because where I'm from, it's 500 people, and your grandparents, your aunts, and your uncles all stay and live in the same house your entire life. Like my grandparents just celebrated their 68th anniversary in their house. So for me, it was pretty crazy to find out that people move every 6 to 8 years on average, depending on obviously where you live. But what really started this journey is I was actually a case manager for mentally ill adults. I did that for 5-6 years. I went to school for human service counseling. I always wanted to help people. And one day my husband, as everybody says, they loved HGTV. They loved the Flip or Flop, all of those television shows and those reality shows. But we watched that a lot. And one day my husband had called me at like 6 a.m. while I was getting our oldest ready. We had just one at the time, and we had a second on the way. And he's like, "Hey, I really want to go to this conference in Omaha, Nebraska. It's a 3-hour conference. It's free." And so I just said, "Okay, let's go ahead and do that." We went to that 3-hour class. That 3-hour class then offered a 3-day class for like $300. So of course we said yes. Now, given $300 back then was still kind of a lot, as working as a case manager for mentally ill adults, you didn't get paid very well. We just bought our first house. We had recently gotten married. So all those things. And then that 3-day, so I was 8 months pregnant by that time. And that 3-day one led to a program that you buy into. And it was $25,000. And keep in mind, that's what I made in a year at that time. And day 2, so I was 8 months pregnant, so I was big. And by day 3, I didn't even go back to day 3 because I was just exhausted. And I told my husband, I was like, "We are not doing this. Like, we'll just take away the information that we got, kind of go from there." And he calls me day 3 because I didn't end up going. And he's like, "I really think we need to do this." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like, no." Well, anyway, we did it. Took out credit cards, no joke, took out credit cards to be able to pay for it. It was like 12-month interest free. And I think some of them were like 18 months interest free. We increased our credits or our credit limit on the credit cards that we had. So we paid $25,000 for this program. I cannot remember. It's CT Homes with Than Merrill. It was an awesome program. And to this day, I could still log into it, but it was, one of the scariest decisions we ever decided to do in all reality. Most people probably would never have taken that leap of faith. It's a lot of money. That first year doing it, I would never want to go back, but I also don't regret it. But it was gut wrenching. It was sickening. Fast forward, we were able to pay it all off by flipping 2 properties in that first year. And then after 2 years of doing that, we probably did, I don't know, maybe 8 homes. And I decided, okay, I'm going to get my real estate license. And I passed, and I put in my notice. I gave them 3 weeks, and then I started it full time in 2018. So that's kind of how the journey went or started off.
That's an incredible story. And I feel like you hear these stories of people in real estate. They take these big leaps like you and your spouse did. And I'm just curious, like, Because you're jumping without a net. Like, how did you handle that emotionally? How did you know you'd be okay? Like, how did you analyze that risk?
Y- Um, so I didn't. I am a person of faith and belief. Like you're not going to see the whole staircase, but you have to take that next step. And you're not going to always do, but if you believe in yourself and you don't give up, one of my favorite quotes that I had heard not too long ago is people don't fail, they quit. And so as long as you don't quit, you're never going to fail. Now, I'm not saying it's not easy. I mean, when I say that year was horrible, it was horrible because our very first flip, we did private money lending. So this class also helps you be able to role play and set up like a script on how to approach friends and family who maybe have money to basically trust you and borrow the money to you. So I mean, they broke it down. They were amazing. We definitely went to a lot of classes. I mean, we didn't have enough money to where when we went to that 3-day class, we stayed at my husband's stepmom's parents' house because we couldn't even afford a hotel. Like that's how scary it was. I could have thrown up a lot. But our very first deal, we took out a line of credit for a HELOC on our primary residence, which wasn't a ton. We did a construction loan and we did private money lending. So I did all three of those in one. And I'll tell you, I learned so much. I learned a lot of the things that I would never do again, but we still made money. So it was fine. But it was a lot. It was a lot. We did a lot of the things ourselves. And a lot of emotions that my husband and I had to work through, good and bad. Like I said, I don't think I would ever want to go do it again, but I don't regret it. I would if I knew where it led me to, but it was hard. It was so hard. People thought we were crazy. People didn't believe in us. And for me, that was ammunition and that was fire. For my husband, it was a little bit heartbreaking because we
Mm.
had these friends who were like, "Oh, they'll never make it. They can't do that. Like they're crazy." And I was like, "I'll show you. That's fine. I don't care." But he was like, "Oh, that's so rude of them." I'm like, just brush it off. Who cares? So handling it, I mean, we handled it. It was a lot because we ended up having our second kid shortly after we decided to invest $25,000, and it's not an expense; it's an investment.
I'm curious, was getting your license mostly to fuel, saving money on your flips? Was it to go into sales? How did you make that decision?
It was a little bit of both. I think I found what I loved most is because we actually sold some of them or most of them privately. So it really wasn't a lot of expense for us, I guess. But I know the value of a real estate agent for sure. But it was to sell. I made a lot of good connections when I was working or when we were doing those flips. I managed all the properties myself from 45 minutes away. We lived in Humphrey. For whatever reason, we were investing in Columbus, but I worked in Norfolk. My husband worked in Columbus, but I was the one managing all the deals and the jobs and the guys. If you ever had to manage guys, no offense out there, but holy moly. But I was managing everybody. I made really good connections, and I think I just fell in love with what real estate had to offer, whether it was sales, flips, investments, and then the people. It was fun to be able to see, okay, we're helping these people out of a tough situation, or we're helping other people get into a home that they've never owned before. So that's really, yeah, it was more sales, more so. We don't do many flips anymore. Only if something comes up and it makes sense. We do more so long term hold.
Totally. And I mean, flipping, as you've described, it's a whole animal in and of itself, and
Mhm.
it's a lot of work. I
Mhm.
think it's so funny, to hear your story from the beginning that you grew up in this family where everybody's lived in the same house for like their whole lives. And
Mhm.
I can relate to that because I come from a small town in Michigan, and every single one of my mom's 9 brothers and sisters have lived in the same house for all 32 years of my life.
Yeah.
So, like, I see that. I'm like, people move because
Right.
my people don't move.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
And so I think it's so funny that led you into sales. And so, continuing on your sales journey, how did you approach building client relationships and relationships that last?
Really stepping outside my comfort zone. I remember going on my first day at work as a real estate agent, and I remember sitting down in a cubicle. This was prior to internet leads and everything. And I remember sitting down and thinking, now what? I thought that there was gonna be a list of buyers and a list of sellers, and that is not the case. And so I just started reaching out to the contractors that we had worked with, saying, "Hey, you know what? I am a real estate agent now," and that's where a lot of my leads came from. In the first 4 months, I closed on 14 transactions. I was door knocking for sale by owners. I was leaving my business cards at their houses, and I was doing all sorts of online classes that I could think of on YouTube more so than anything else. I was diving into books as much as I could. I didn't love reading books at the time, so I had to force myself to do it. But that's really kind of what I ended up doing. And then to sustain my relationships with my clients, it's all in the follow up. It's in the follow up when you're like going after clients, I guess you could say, but it's also in the follow up afterwards. Cause I always remind my clients and myself or my clients that I'm still going to be there beyond the transaction. Our relationship does not end at the transaction. Last year, my stats for my closings, it was 65 to 70% of my transactions came from repeat referrals. And so I would say that I do a really good job at staying in touch through different systems. So I utilize TPMCO, and you can do what's called a follow-up plan, where after every closing, you just put in their information, their forwarding address, and then they will get a postcard or a newsletter from you for 5 years every quarter. And so that's just to set it and forget it. And then I have a couple other things like email campaigns, which I'm not a huge fan of, so whatever. And then I also have another drip campaign where it sends them a card after a month, 3 months, 6 months, and then they get a box of brownies at their 1 year. So I set that up at the beginning as soon as we close, and then it's just to set it and forget it. And then I do 4 client appreciations every year. And obviously, if I'm driving by somebody's house, I'm like, oh, hey, let me text them like, hey, how are you doing? I thought of you. So that's really what I've done. It can be exhausting at times, but it's definitely well worth it. I love hearing that things are going well, or if they have any questions, I want to be there to help out.
Oh, for sure. And I love the set it and forget it. I mean, obviously you keep them top of mind, but for the things that you can automate, it sounds like you've automated to the nines.
Right. Yes. Yes. I mean, we could always probably improve and get better and stuff, but this is kind of what's worked for me over the years. And I think it's just done really well, and it kind of proves itself with having a 65 to 70% repeat referral database.
Oh, totally. So,
Mm-hmm.
Shay, I'm curious what advice you would have for those first time buyers in today's market.
Get educated, find an agent who really does know their stuff, because I think so many agents rely on the lender too heavily when it comes to like the loan types and stuff. But what happens with first time home buyers, and you want a local agent because every county, state, city is going to be different on what they offer for loans and programs. So, for instance, we in Columbus, we can accept RD, which is 0% down. If you're in Omaha and Lincoln, you can't because the population is too big. So there's things like that. And then there's also different programs. Like if you're a first time home buyer, NIFA, it's a first time home buyer program attached to the loan to help lower your interest rates. Then you can also do what's called an HBA loan. So that basically helps cover your down payment. And then sometimes we can get the sellers to cover your closing costs. So for instance, I have a closing this week where the seller or the buyer is literally getting $1,800 back
Oh,
at
wow.
closing, because we were able to, she's doing it's like I think it was FHA, NIFA, HUBA. So she's getting money. It's a whole thing, but that helps because then you can put that money towards any repairs, replacements, updates, things like that. So I would definitely say like interview buyers agents. And just because a lender approves you for a certain loan type and program doesn't mean you have to stick with that, because I've had situations where the lender's like, oh, they qualify for an FHA loan. Well, then we get into it and the house that they absolutely love, there's multiple offers. Okay, well, contact that lender in advance and say, hey, if there's multiple offers, could they go conventional? And if they can go conventional, what's that cost sheet look like? Is that something the buyers would be confident and comfortable with? And if it is, great, let's make an offer on as a conventional loan instead of an FHA. So I see that a lot that agents just heavily rely on what the lender says and gives them and doesn't ask like, hey, could we go this route? Or could we try this if we could get this? Like you got to get creative with it. And that's what I've always loved.
Yeah, yeah, especially because I mean the homeowner, especially if they're a first time buyer, they don't know all of these things. They're learning this lingo for the first time. The whole
Mm-hmm.
process in and of itself is overwhelming, and
Mm-hmm.
so they really need someone who can be their guide.
Very much so. Very much so. Like I'm not here just to chase that deal and get it to closing. I mean, obviously we want it to get to closing for the sake of, the clients. You have somebody who's wanting to sell and you have somebody who's wanting to buy, but also ultimately my fiduciary duty is to look out for the buyer's best interest.
And then Shae, I'm curious what your advice would be for sellers in today's market. I know at least in my area, it's still quite a seller's market, so I'm curious what you're seeing in your area.
It's really slowed down. I mean, depending on the price point, style, location, obviously they can still go fairly quickly, but it's really slowed down. So it's right now for sellers, patience is a big thing. First impressions is also a big thing. So one of the things that I offer when working with me is I love vacant homes and then having my staging lady go in there and stage it because it is so important to have things decluttered, depersonalized. A fresh coat of paint might be something pretty simple. Getting the carpets clean, having it smell good, especially if you have pets, because that I feel like can be a make or break. Sometimes people can't get past the smell of pets or whatever might be in there. So you really want to make sure that it's appealing to people as they walk in. All their senses, how they feel, see, taste, smell, all the things. So definitely they need to spend a little bit more time getting the home ready before, unlike, the last 2, 3, 4 years, you could throw anything on the market and it'd sell in a heartbeat. Now sellers are having to put a little bit more effort into cleaning it and getting it ready, but it's also important to have the right agent who knows how to market, who does the professional photos, the videos, mailing out postcards and things along those lines.
I do think smell is super important. When my husband and I were looking at houses this summer, and we've kind of like paused our journey for right now, but we like the only house we actually considered putting in an offer on was one that smelled like apples and cinnamon. All the other ones smelled like pets or just kind of like stale.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it makes
Uh-huh.
a huge difference. And now I'm not saying that's the reason we put in or we were considering it, but I'm sure it went a long way.
It does. It makes a bigger difference than people think. Like people are like, oh, they can get past it. And subconsciously, I don't think people realize that, buyers and stuff. But like you said, I mean, for some reason, that one just stood out to you a little bit more. But a smell of a property makes a huge difference. Huge difference.
Yeah. And it costs you probably like a $5, like you can just get the cheapest air freshener as long
Right.
as it smells like fresh and clean.
Yeah.
That's my philosophy.
I know, but when you got pets, sometimes those air fresheners almost make it worse. So it's like, can you find a place for your pets to go? Like that would be ideal. Get your house cleaned, deep clean the carpets, and then get those fresheners in there. But sometimes you got to be kind and sensitive with that for people.
Mhm.
That does make a big difference.
Shae, do you have a particularly memorable or rewarding transaction that you can think of, or maybe one that you found really challenging that you learned something from?
Like everyone. The one that sticks out in my mind the most, I've had several of them, but it was to the point where I had so many hives. I still have a video of it. This was probably 3 years ago. I was so stressed because, and it wasn't my fault. It wasn't the seller's fault, but it's kind of a long story and how to explain it. But the utilities were on the neighboring property and there was no easement. So, like the gas company, they have access to the meter. Well, there was no easement from the meter to this seller's property. And it was literally like 5 feet, not much at all. Well, the buyer wanted to have an easement because if anything ever broke, they wanted to make sure that they had the right to be able to go in and fix that. The neighbor absolutely refused, would not sell them, would not sell them. We even asked if they could buy like that little section of land, would not do it. They offered to pay to have the easement done, just and literally like 5 feet. So every single thing that like there's just one thing after another. And then that neighbor ended up putting the property, the land up for sale around. So my buyer or my sellers were trying to buy it. It was such a political situation that happened, and it was just one thing after another. And the most frustrating part is my sellers ended up coming down like $20,000 just to get the deal done because they were moving out of state. But the most irritating part, because the buyers, nope, we need this done, we have to have it. They never did an easement. They never did an
Oh,
easement. And but what's amazing about it is that my sellers still, they never blamed me one time, like it, because it wasn't my fault, but they never saw it as my problem. But I had hives so bad up and down my legs that I ended up going to the hospital to get put on some steroids. Like that is
oh
just one
my.
that jumps out in my mind. But that seller to this day, and that was probably 4 years ago. It was actually pre-COVID, so maybe five. To this day, will always say, "You're such an inspiration." She follows me on social media. I mean, she gave me two plants from their house that I still have, and one of them was actually from her dad's funeral in 2011. I don't keep plants alive, so I'm like, "Don't give that to me."
Oh,
It is still alive, barely, but it is alive. But that's probably the number one that stands out in my mind that was hell, to say the
yeah, that
least.
sounds heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
it's so good of your clients to recognize that there was kind of nothing that could be done, right?
right, right. And everything that I would find out a solution, I would figure out a solution, and then something else would come up, and I'm like, what is going on? It was horrible. It was horrible, but it closed, so we're good. But it was, and most of the time, as an agent, you end up being the bad person, which is unfortunate. But I think that when you do have situations like that or other situations, always, I mean, I don't want to say take the blame, but you want to stay on good terms with your clients. Even if it wasn't your fault, you still want to kind of like stroke their ego and be like, I understand. Like, and we're human. We all make mistakes. So own your mistakes. That's another huge piece of advice when you are a real estate agent. Own your mistakes. Don't try to blame somebody else. And even if it is somebody else's fault, just say, hey, you know what? I apologize. Like I overlooked that. I should have been more aware. Because that happens too. But when you're like, oh, it was that person, it was that person, that doesn't make you look professional, in my opinion, I guess. So I will own any mistakes that I do or anybody on my team. Like if something happens, well, that was my fault. I should have been taking or paying closer attention, or I'm so sorry I overlooked that. But that's another big piece of advice that I would encourage agents to, just take ownership of any mistakes that happen throughout the transaction because we are human,
Yeah.
and communicate.
I think that's great advice. Would you say those are like your biggest lessons, or would you have something else that you would say is like maybe one of your biggest lessons you've learned in real estate?
Yeah, I would say taking ownership of things and not trying to push problems onto somebody else and then over communicate. You want to keep people in the loop as much as possible, good or bad. Another piece of advice, though, kind of when it comes to communication, because I do say you want to over communicate. However, when a problem arises, emotional intelligence is the key to any success. You need to be able to keep your emotions in check because when a problem arises, which they do, don't go running to your clients, whether you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent, and be like, oh my gosh, we have this problem, I don't know what we're going to do. No, what I typically do is I'm going to find solutions to this. It might take me a day, maybe 2 days, so I'm not reaching out to my clients. Sometimes that's longer than I want it to take, but I would rather come to my clients with a solution to the problem rather than saying, hey, here's the problem. I don't know what I'm going to do. No, have a solution, one or two, maybe three, and say, hey, this is what is going on. Like, for example, I had one last week where we had the clear to close. It was the craziest thing. On October 22nd, we had the clear to close. And then last week on Tuesday, all of a sudden, I find out that there were items in the appraisal that needed to be taken care of. I was like, how did this happen? How? So we were scrambling. My sellers, I didn't tell them that we had to have these repairs done. And then we still had to have the appraiser go back and confirm and do all of that until later that day when we had the contractors lined up. They were going over there that night. I already talked to the appraiser. She was going to go out the next day or the day after. So once we figured all of that out, I called her. I said, hey, everything's going well, but still want to let you know that we had a hiccup. I'm not sure how it happened, but there were repairs that needed to be completed for this FHA loan. We have people out there this evening who will get it all taken care of. And she was already not living there, but she's like, oh, okay, that makes sense because I saw a couple guys out there. I didn't think anything of it, but I appreciate you letting me know. So things like that would be emotional intelligence. Because when emotions are high, logic is low. So if you're feeding off of high emotions, they're going to as well, or negative, whichever way. So emotional intelligence, big thing.
Yeah, sometimes you just gotta like walk away, walk outside, get a breath of fresh air, and
Yep.
then then we can take some action.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Shay, do you have any habits or routines that help drive your success?
I would think so. I've always been, I shouldn't say always, but I'm more of a morning person. I think a morning routine is incredibly important. Not only for the routine, but for time to yourself. I think as busy entrepreneurs and real estate agents, we get so caught up in serving everybody else and our family and our kids and our spouses that we forget to put time into ourselves, um, which is the most important thing. And faith, whatever your religion is or whatever, but having faith outside yourself that you are going down the right path, you know? And so I would say my biggest thing is my morning routine. That is my time. That is me time. I usually get up around 4:30, between 4:30 and 5. Actually, it's set at 4:25. Between 4:25 and 5 o'clock. I actually I have a gratitude and journal. So this is what it looks like. So I usually do this the night before, and then this in the morning, and then this at night, and then I'll plan my next day. I usually know what I'm doing the next day. I have a list of other things that I need to address and take care of as well. But I don't ever go to bed not knowing what my plan is the next day because ultimately, as a real estate agent, you wake up unemployed every single day. So a lot of people are like, oh, okay, well, it's a new day. Let me figure out what I'm going to do. No, you need to figure that out. Typically on Sunday, have a general idea of what your week looks like. And then the night before, really honing down on, okay, what am I going to do? Now, it's not going to go perfect. I can't tell you any time that it's ever fallen exactly that way, but it does go along closer. Things come up. So you're not always going to get that done. And really being grateful for the things that you do have with where you're at. I had a quote that I loved over the weekend, but I don't remember what it was. It was like, I don't remember. I'm not even going to try because I'll just waste time. But I would say my morning routine and really, really taking that time for me because I got 3 little kids and a husband, and I like my mornings. I like my mornings. And if you're not a morning person, even if you can get up a half hour earlier to do reading, meditation, whatever it is, peace, being still, quiet time, that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. I've got a solid morning routine too, and it's the one time in the day right before the world wants your attention,
Yes.
right? Because I find same thing for myself. If I say I'm going to skip my reading in the morning and I'll do it later in the day, no, I won't. No, I
No.
won't because the world has asked for my attention and I'm giving it and I'm distracted and
Mhm.
all of these things. And I love your point about gratitude because it is important. You know, we're in November, so right, this is usually the time of year where we're thinking about giving thanks and things like that. But I'm sure there's a fancy quote about this too, but I think regular gratitude rewires your brain. It rewires the way you look at things, and that goes a long way.
It does. And gratitude and negativity cannot live in the same time at the same moment. So, like, if you're being gratitude, that negativity, so like if you feel a lot of negativity or depression or anxiety, start rambling off things that you're grateful for. It really does change the wiring in your brain, even if it's just for that moment. But obviously, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, just like riding a bike. But because your negativity, your depression, your anxiety cannot live in the same moment as gratitude. So that's the one thing that I've learned as well. And another thing is not just being grateful in your head or saying out loud and doing your affirmations and stuff, but put it in your phone and sending it to somebody. Like I've done like video recordings, I'll do text messages, like, and it doesn't need to be anything crazy. Like, hey, you know what? I noticed that you did this the other day. I truly appreciate everything that you do. Or, hey, I noticed that you got a promotion at work. On social, I saw on social media that you got that. Congratulations, that is amazing. So like trying to be grateful to other people My goal that I have a next 60-day goal. My goal is to do that for 2 people every single day, different people so that's 120 people. That's a lot of people to be grateful for, or at least send something out to. Maybe it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it kind of is, It's like, okay, now who am I going to text? But it makes you look for those opportunities, and it looks for, anybody who is needing that gratitude.
Oh yeah, no, that does sound like a lot. I will say that. That does not sound easy, one. And two, it's a great way to give back, and then it's a great way to pay attention, to kind of like open your eyes back up to actually like looking at what other people are saying and doing, and not just kind of like mindlessly being like, "Oh, that was a cute fall photo." Like
Right.
actually ingesting
Yeah.
what's going on in other people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Those little things can make a big difference. Instead of just commenting or liking their post, why don't you send them a direct message and say, hey, you know what? Your family photos were beautiful. You look great. Just little things like that. It makes a huge difference.
I love that. So, Shae, you have your own podcast, your Real Moms podcast. I'd love to talk about your inspiration for starting this platform.
So, being a little bit vulnerable, last year, about a year and a half ago, I went through like a true mental breakdown. Do not know why. And it wasn't just like a little bit of depression, a little bit of anxiety. I mean, I wasn't sleeping but an hour and a half, 2 hours a night. I lost 15 pounds in like 2 weeks. It was horrible. Like, I would never wish that upon my worst enemy. It probably lasted like 4 weeks. I remember calling my doctor at like 4 in the morning. I'm like, am I going to get better? And my coach, and I'm like, my coach is going to fire me. There's no end in sight. It was horrible. Um, and I can joke about it now because I'm in a much better place. But I had a lot of changes that happened last year. And I think it was just kind of a snowball of everything. But it was something that I had never experienced. I've always struggled with anxiety and depression, but not to this point. And so during that time, I had reached out to a couple women who I do a lot of business with. One's a lender and one is an insurance agent. And I said, we really need to create a community here locally for us mompreneurs, because it's just a different mentality and it's a different stress. God bless anybody who's a stay at home mom. I could never do that. That would be mentally tough for sure. And even anybody who's a W-2 job. I'm not putting that down by any means, but it's just a different kind of stress. You know what I mean? When you're an
Hmm.
entrepreneur and you're a mom and you're a spouse and you're trying to handle the household stuff and the kids' activities and making sure that they're alive. But anyway, so we started doing that. We started a Real Moms. It's Resilient Entrepreneurs and Abundant Living. So we started getting together every 2 weeks, and we still do that to this day here locally, where I bring in like CPA, attorney, health nutritionist, anything and everything that has to do with like your faith, health, relationship, business, and finances. I've brought people to come in and speak, whether it's virtually, in person, and then just building this community. And so, because I really have a passion for that, I think there's a lot of women out there that you kind of lose your sense of identity as a mom because you're so focused on being a mom. And then you wake up when you're a day like, who the hell is Shae? Like, or who is Kat? You're like, who am I? And we battle with that on a regular basis. And then you have the mom guilt when you're an entrepreneur. It's like, oh my gosh, fortunately, I've never missed like my kids' sporting events unless I was like away on a trip for some reason. But my kids are still my priority. And I've gotten better, over the years on like delegating and making that a priority for my kids' time. But especially when you first get into as an entrepreneur, you're working a lot. People are like, oh, you have such great flexibility. Okay, well, I'm working 100 hours a week. What are you working? Like, it's just like, okay, well, instead of me working in the middle of the day for those 2 hours so I can go to my kids' play, okay, well, now I'm working on the weekends. You know what I mean? So it's just a lot of
Hmm.
give and take. So back in January, and I had a podcast many years ago for entrepreneurs in our local area, but I just really had a passion for mompreneurs. And so I was on a call with somebody. I don't remember the whole situation, to be honest. I think they were doing like an article on me or something. Um, and afterwards, she's like, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? She's like, you really need to. I said, well, I did in the past. She's like, but I can tell you're really passionate about mompreneurs. And so she got me connected with these producers. And so I've just kind of taken off with that. And it's been awesome. It's been fun to learn other women's journeys and growing that and just really being able to give back to others, and know that you're not alone, that at no matter what level you're at, you're there's going to be suffering, there's going to be heartaches, there's going to be challenges and hurdles and obstacles, but that's where the growth is at. So it's almost exciting for me anymore. When I do see an obstacle, I'm like, all right. And sometimes I don't even notice they're obstacles because I'm just so used to it that I just figure it out and you move on. So it's fun and exciting knowing that every new level is a new devil, that it's not just like, oh, that person's really successful, that must have been pretty easy for her. No, it sucked. The climb sucked. There was a lot of suffering. But that's part of the journey and we need to learn to enjoy that.
Yeah, I think building community is so vital, especially it's great when you can have people locally, but even we live in such a beautiful digital age globally, nationally, just knowing you're not alone and talking to people who are working through similar problems as you and learning from others. I think that's why podcasting is so great. It's so accessible, like so many people can do it. And I think that's the gift of
Mm-hmm.
being a part of a podcast, listening to a podcast, just the whole genre.
Right. And one thing that I'm really excited about, I'm going to be coming out with, I've been teaming up with another individual. He's actually a guy, but we're going to have this, it's called Real Inventory. I already purchased the domain, so nobody can go out there and purchase it. But it's called Real Inventory, where I'm going to take, because I've spent like hundreds of thousands of dollars on self-help and masterminds over the last 5-6 years. And that sounds crazy. It was about $165,000. And that does not include travel or anything like that, because I really want to pour into other people and be a better individual as well. But, and that doesn't, countless hours listening to other podcasts, like the Mindset Mentor. He has like 1,800 podcasts. I think I've listened to at least half of them 3 different times. So we're taking all of my knowledge and experience and we're putting it into, because one of the biggest things that we struggle with, even if you are an entrepreneur, is like, okay, what is my mission, what is my vision, what is my passion, like what fires me up and gets me going, where I can also monetize it as well. So we're putting together a questionnaire basically, where women, it's going to be directed towards mompreneurs, or even somebody who's like, I feel like there's something in me that I need to figure out. So we're putting together this questionnaire for your next step of figuring out what are you drawn for? What is your purpose? What should be pulled out of you? So we're really working on that. I'm really excited, because like I said, even if you are an entrepreneur, sometimes it's like, I don't know if this is what I want. And I have a passion for mompreneurs. I love everything about real estate, but I feel like I have a lot more spark when it comes to that. So how can I monetize that? Like, is that my true mission that I'm here for? Is that my true purpose? So I'm really excited. We're creating and cultivating, instead of somebody having to spend, I don't want to say waste, but spend 5 years of their life, tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours for podcasts and books. We can put this into one simple form that you answer the questions, and the better the questions, the more time you spend on answering the questions and the better your response to these questions, the more detail oriented it's going to be. So, or the better chance it's going to give you the proper information that you're looking for. So I'm really excited about that. That's something that we started working on over the weekend and really going to focus on the next week or two. So.
Oh, that does sound exciting. And I think the gift that you're giving is you're distilling like everything you've learned, everything you've put into practice to the most practical, the most effective, actionable steps, and therefore you can kind of help. And this is the benefit of us learning from each other, is that we don't all have to go through step 1, step 2, step 3. Like if I'm on step 1 and you're on step 10, I might be able to step 5, right? Because you're telling me, wait, you can hopscotch past these.
Mm-hmm.
We can just get places faster and find peace faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But kind of going off of that as well, is like one thing that we all do as well is we compare our step 1 to somebody's step 20. And I catch myself doing that all the time. Like I compare myself, like somebody might be younger. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I not doing enough? How did he get there? How do I get there? But we are in the place that we are meant to be right here, right now. You know what I mean? Like, so we need to stop comparing ourselves. I even get caught up in comparing myself to like 60-year-olds. I'm like, and I literally count. I'm like, okay, that's 27 years from now. How much? Like, what? Stop. Like, just take it breather. But your your proximity is key. Who you're connecting yourself with is going to help propel you forward to where you want to go and probably even beyond. So if it means you're spending money on these masterminds to get in the right rooms, then you need to do that. And keep in mind, it's not just a one time. It is a constant, just like any relationship. You got to constantly feed it, or anything that you do in life when it comes to health and fitness. Like, you have to constantly do it on a daily basis in order for you to get to your goal. So, and it's not a destiny, or it's not a destination. And that's what people need to realize. Like, learn to enjoy the moment. Even as hard as that is, I still have to remind myself as well, but we're not chasing a destiny. Like, it truly is the journey that you're going through to get where you want to go. Because once you get where you want to go, what are you going to want to do? Well, you're going to want to do more. That's just human nature. So you're never going to truly get to your destination, because there's always going to be more. There's always going to be another level. So learn to enjoy the process, as much as you can. Like, stop and smell the roses. Like, it sounds like a cliche saying, but it is true. It is true.
I agree with that. I constantly find myself falling into that trap of like, well, once I clear everything off my to-do list, and it's like the to-do list is the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And so if I can just stop thinking of it as like things I just got to get done to be happy, and I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy doing each little step,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm enjoying my whole life and not just like select portions of it.
Yes. Yeah. It is so true. It is so true. And I think your significant other is a very important part of it. I actually just asked my husband today. I said, "Hey, one of my goals over the next 60 days." I gave him a whole list of things. But one of the bigger things is building my faith and then getting closer to him. I said, "So I want you to give me." I'm sure he's got a whole list of things that irritate him, frustrate him, or things that I could do better as a wife. Not just as a mom, not as a business owner, but as a wife. What can I do to, recognize what he does? So he's like, "Oh, that might take a while. I'll get back to you later." And I'm like, shoot. But I mean, I at least ask those questions, and I want him to be honest. I'm open to constructive criticism. I would say I'm a very good student, not just in business, but in life and personal. The old me would have been like, no, I'm doing great. I don't need to change anything. You're wrong. Where now I'm welcoming it. Like, what I really want to know what I can do to be a better wife.
Shae, I'm curious with your Real Moms podcast if you have like a most memorable story from, the people you've talked to, or like a lesson you might have learned from talking to another mompreneur that really sticks out to you.
Very much so. So earlier this year, I have my marketing lady. She's very conservative. She's very reserved. She's very shy, doesn't branch out. Like, she's doing her own thing, but like, she's very reserved, very, very reserved. And I can see her potential far greater than she can. Like, she's always putting herself down for whatever reason, and not stepping outside her comfort zone, because she gets very uncomfortable quickly. And she knows all this. So even if she heard this, she would not even be upset about it. But I love her. I love her dearly. We've gotten so close over the last year. She's done so much for me, but I know that she feels that I've done so much for her. But earlier this year, I decided to go to, I don't know if you've heard of Amberly Lago. She has an event. It's Unstoppable event. I've had Amberly speak to our Real Moms group before, but anyway, so I decided to get a ticket to her conference. And I put it out there to the Real Moms group community. And I said, "Hey, does anybody want to go? This is roughly the cost. And this is when it is." And I said to myself, because the lady that I'm talking about, financially, things have gotten a little bit tough. I mean, obviously the economy, kids, health, all of those things. So expenses were going to be a little bit are tight. And so I said to myself in my head, if this individual reaches out to me directly saying that she wants to go, I'm going to pay for her ticket. That's what I told God. I said, "God, if she reaches out to me," because I had sent it out to like 20 women. And I said, if she reaches out to me directly, about wanting to go, I'm going to pay for her ticket. And she reached out to me directly. And I didn't tell her I was going to pay for it. Didn't say anything. I said, well, you need to talk to your husband, see if that works. So she was still going to have to pay for her flight and her stay and still food. I said, why don't you talk to your husband? This is the cost of everything. And she got him on board. And I said, perfect. I already bought your ticket, you know. And ironically, while we're there, Amberly gave out 2 free VIP tickets for next year. She was the first winner to win the
Oh,
VIP ticket. It is the craziest thing. And so like fast forward and like obviously she cried and she's like, you don't need to do that. I'm like, I I want to. Like I told her, I said, I specifically told God and told myself that if she reached out to me directly about going, because she was the number one person I felt needed that. And everybody has told her since she's come back, like she just seems to be so transformed. But again, she started to fall back into her old ways because it's one of those things that you have to keep going. So she actually just went to a conference last week by herself she had a fly. She's never done that. She's never been on a plane by herself. She's never gone anywhere by herself. And she's like, Shae, I can't thank you enough for pushing me because she almost backed out. Like 2 days before, she's like, I don't think I'm going to go. I'm like, you're going to go. You're going. Like, you have to. So, I mean, just things like that, that she's like, I thank you so much for believing in me. And she started to see like her value too. So I've challenged her and many others to look beyond their own limiting belief, or at least recognize their own limiting belief, because we all have them, but sometimes we don't realize them.
mm-hmm. Oh, that's such a beautiful story. And I'm so glad she's just, expanding and really taking up space
Mhm.
right from the things that she's learning. I'm excited for her.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So yeah, that would be my number one. Obviously, there's many others, but and I don't charge for this community that I put on. I think eventually I might like a small fee just because I have paid speakers to come in. So right now that comes out of my pocket, so that might be something, but it's not going to be a moneymaker because I love it. It's just I love it. So yeah.
Oh, well, that's so cool. Shay, bringing it back, well, and I guess it could be from the podcast too, but I'm thinking maybe more real estate side. Are you experiencing any challenges in your current real estate market? And if so, how are you overcoming them?
Yeah, I mean, market has slowed down, so it's kind of like, okay, let's get a little bit creative. How can I separate myself from others? What am I doing differently? So one of the things that I did earlier, maybe mid this year, is I kind of rebranded myself. I rebranded to lilac purple. It sounds weird, but purple was always my favorite color. And everybody's like, "Oh, you need to have a color." Well, I try to like force myself to go with red, because it stands out. It's bold. And then like we in the Real Moms community, we had somebody come talk to us about branding and Canva, and it just like clicked. So I just rebranded myself to purple, and I've had a lot more people be like, "Oh, I see you everywhere." And it's not that I'm any more places. I think it's just it stands out. It stands out more than those other ones. So rebranding myself to really what I love, because like I felt like I was forcing myself to go red, and I'm glad I got away from it. It's fine. Red's a beautiful color, but this lilac purple, they're like, oh yeah, that's Shae. Like, I mean, everything that I have, like my cups and my book bag and my bag and my clothes, typically I'm wearing purple, but like my phone cover, it's all purple. I'm like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go big. Um, so that would be one of them. But then the other thing that I'm working on right now that has been beyond challenging mentally, emotionally, everything is I'm actually going to be doing a development here in our town. And that is a lot. I have learned so much in the last 6 months. But I also know that has taken away of some of my my transactions now, which is not bad, but are not, I mean, it has slowed down in my opinion a little bit, but I know I'm putting so much focus on this development because I'm actually one of the developers. And so there's just a lot of moving parts. So like I have recordings this Wednesday for my podcast because that's usually when I do my recordings, and I'm going to have to reschedule some of them because we have a very important development meeting that we have coming up on Wednesday. So I would say that's my biggest challenges. My husband even asked me last week, he goes, Shae, I trust that you know what you're doing with this whole development, but could it not work? I was like, well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a possibility that it could not work. Cause now I'm putting up all my assets to purchase the land it's a whole thing. But he goes, okay, well, what happens if it doesn't work out? And I said, well, we lose it all. We lose it all. And and he's like, and then what? And I said, we figure it out and we start over. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, so people probably think I'm freaking crazy. But the reason we got to where we're at is because of the risks that I've taken on myself and that he's taken on himself. And nothing changes if nothing changes. And it's not about the money at a certain point. It's more about how far can I go? How can I help others? Like this development will bring, I don't want to say affordable housing because in my opinion, there's no such thing as affordable housing anymore between interest rates, taxes, and insurance, but at least workforce housing. Like the comparables for the homes that we're going to be putting up are $70,000 to $80,000 more than what we're going to be pricing them at. So, I mean, like, what is this going to do for this community? Like, I'm putting literally everything that I've worked for the last 8, 10 years on the line for this development. And I know nobody's going to know that. Nobody's going to recognize that. Nobody's going to know the emotional stress that I've gone through and my husband's going to go through and the financial stressors that we've put ourselves on the line. Like I'm putting up all my assets, literally all of my assets that I've worked for over the last 10 years on the line because I believe in it that much to bring value to our community in order to grow our community. But I know
Wow.
most people are never going to know that. They're not going to realize that. They're going to look at it and be like, oh, that must be nice. You know what I mean? That's usually what people do. Like, oh, that must be nice. She got lucky. Okay. Okay.
Well, and for some of those people, you kind of just have to let them be wrong about you, right? And for you, I think that this is the ultimate way you can give back, right? Is to to make this more affordable housing or this, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
make this housing that's more accessible
Yeah.
financially, and really want to see the people in your community thrive in that way.
And I want to see the community grow. And I mean, I know that after this, I mean, it's going to be a 15-year project. It really is. But then it's like, okay, well, what's next? What more can I do? Like, that's the exciting part. It's like the progress of life. It's not, I don't know, it's the progress. And that's why you see a lot of people who retire. If you don't find something else to do, you're going to dwindle away. Or you see people who sell their businesses for multi-million or multi-billion dollars and then they go do something else. Like as an entrepreneur, because you can't, it's not about the money. It's about the progress and the impact that you make on other people's lives.
It sounds like you have a busy 2025 coming up. I'm curious how you approach your goal setting as we're looking towards the new year.
hmm So I have a coach. So that's one thing that him and I are going to be strategically working on. I have some agents who are underneath of me. So like last year, at the end of last year, we sat down. I'll just pull this. So we sat down and we created a marketing plan, what that looks like. So I have it always hanging here. And we pre-scheduled dates. Okay, like on this date, this is what we're going to do for this client appreciation event. So we put it in here and we figure it out. So that's one of the things that we're going to be getting together to do that. And again, the agents don't have to. And whoever does want to, we'll just split the cost with that. And then you have your own cost for your own clients. Like one of the things that we did last year was movie night. So we didn't reserve the theater, but it was like in February and it was a Tuesday night. And we sent out an invite like, hey, you guys come, date night, family night, whatever it is, we will pay for your way into the movies. You can go to whatever movie you want. So that was fun to see. That was fun to see. There was actually a handful of husband and wives who actually got a babysitter to go out to the movies. So I thought that was really neat. But that's one of the things that I'm working on to prepare for the marketing side. But I'm doing a lot of other things on the back end with my websites and CRM to get ready for this development. Like today, I just went in and I bought the domain for that as well, and I got it set up that if somebody, it's just like, hey, coming soon. If you want more information, here, send your, give me your email address and we'll keep you in the loop when it starts to flourish. So, just kind of strategic things along those lines that I'm preparing for mentally. Yeah.
Totally. Well, it sounds so very exciting. I'm so excited for you, your team, your family, your town.
hmm
Shae, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today. Would you like to let everyone know how they can follow you and find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my social media handle, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook is Shae, Shae, J, as in Joe, my middle name, Spitz, Spitz. So that's my social media handle. Otherwise, you can always give me a call at 402-741-2576. And then my website is homeswithshae.com. So homes is plural and then Shae is Shae. So you can reach out to me there via email or via text or anywhere on my social media. So would love to have everybody reach out, and I'm happy to help however I can.
Awesome. And we'll link everything below so people can find you with just a click. Shae, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Kat.
Thank you for listening to The Closing Table, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm your host, Kat Schooler. Please be sure you're following our podcast on Apple or Spotify, and if you're part of our YouTube audience, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're enjoying our podcast, please feel free to leave us a comment or review. It helps us find more amazing listeners like you. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.